Hey, what's going on, guys? We're going to do chapter 28, section 3 today as we start to finish up the rest of the year here. Um, I'll have a couple of voiceovers, and then that'll really start finishing it up until we can get to the review for the final. All right, so basically, I'm going to just go over this quickly. Again, it's like yesterday, it's not that long of me speaking. I'll post the section 3 homework, get that in, and obviously, you get full credit for it. So, let's talk a little bit, and let me open up the view here. Okay. We're really just going to kind of talk. We talked a little bit about the war, the Cold War being over yesterday. So we can kind of shift our focus a little bit. Right after the Soviet Union dissolves, the U.S. is the only remaining superpower. So under President Bush and President Clinton, the U.S. will take a bigger stage in the world and look for democracy and peace. And one of the things they look at is South Africa. South Africa for years had a policy of apartheid, which is basically non-whites could not vote. It was basically segregation based on race and skin color, kind of like the Jim Crow laws or Plessy v. Ferguson, separate but equal in the United States. All right, in the mid '80s, the United States will really start pushing South Africa to open that up, and they actually start cutting off some of their money fund. Until eventually, in 1991, South Africa's government actually ends it, and then in 1994, one of the most influential men of the 20th century, Nelson Mandela, will be elected to the first president. He himself being an African American who actually had been imprisoned fighting apartheid years earlier. All right, and these were actual signs very similar to the Jim Crow laws of the South during segregation, which we talked about in detail. All right, here is Nelson Mandela. All right, this was him in prison, who was imprisoned for fighting being separated based on race, which is known as apartheid. And here he is being released from prison shortly thereafter. He gets elected as president of South Africa. Again, monumental milestone, one of the most influential men of the 20th century, an incredible life story. Okay, we also shift our attention to Cuba. All right, without the Soviet Union being there to support Cuba, Cuba really goes into some economic despair. Okay, and they try to ease. A lot of Cubans are trying to defect and get out of Cuba into the United States. By 1994, the United States will trade a little bit more with Cuba. President Bush will relax bans, will refuse to relax more bans, and then in 2015, President Obama will begin to ease tensions and opening up a little bit of more conversation with Cuba. So you can see a lot of nations that the United States could now focus on, they could because the Cold War was over. Some of the other things they did, obviously, was talking about nuclear war. All right, 1972, the United States and the Soviet Union will sign the SALT Treaty, the Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty. All right, that's something you put on your dinner table. All right, 1979, they sign another one. All right, by 91, the United States and Russia will sign the START Treaty, the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, where they agreed to destroy 20% of their nuclear weapons. This is a big deal. In 93, they signed another one. In 97, they signed another one. And they're really trying, the United States and Russia will really start cutting down on how many nuclear missiles countries can have. And here are some pictures. President Bush and Gorbachev, President Bush and President Yeltsin of the Russia. Here is President Clinton and President. Here they are trying to work out ending the nuclear wars, and it leads us to what's known as, and it's one of my favorite vocabulary words, nuclear proliferation. All right, meaning how many countries have um, nuclear missiles. In the 60s, Israel's will get them. In the 80s, Iran, Iraq, North Korea has them. India, Pakistan. And this map will actually give you a breakdown of how many, and this was a couple of years ago, so it's probably the numbers have changed, how many countries throughout the world actually had nuclear missiles. Okay, Russia, the US, France, China, UK, Great Britain, Israel, Pakistan, India, North Korea. I want to break it down for you a little bit more in maps here. All right, so just because the Cold War was over, all right. The idea of countries not having nuclear missiles became a very, very big deal. Again, the more that have them, the worse things can be. So they really start throughout the world, specifically Russia and the United States, will start working together to try to limit these numbers. All right. It's known as nuclear proliferation. Okay. So again, kind of leading us into the 1990s here. We're going to get into the late 90s in a little bit. Sorry, mid 90s, late 90s. until ultimately get into the last unit. So do the worksheet that's posted. And any questions, let me know. And take care.